Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk about how the classical period has had a profound influence on modern rhetoric, speeches that we give, the persuasion techniques that we use in this day and age, and the importance of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle's, their foundings, their guidelines for rhetoric, how we still use that today. So the classical period took place between 500 BCE and 400 BCE. And this is when we had our great orators like Aristotle, Socrates, put forth these guidelines that are still taught in classes today. We are still learning about persuasion, how to influence our audience in order to meet our goals, how to elicit emotion from the audience, what kinds of narrative evidence we need or statistical evidence that we need. This was all created during the classical period and is still very much used today to from everything from speeches in the workplace to your staff to political debates between presidential candidates. So for myself, I was a supervisor with the FPS, and during that time I was able to do a few live interviews with Ken's Five in order to ask for donations from the public for the families that we served. And so during this time, these interviews were live. I had to know what I was going to say, strategize, be prepared, but also be quick on my feet because there was no practice. There was no second chances. It was just a live audience. And that was exciting, but it could also be a little overwhelming. We were in the studio, there were different reporters. Sometimes the background was very loud. And so having to adjust to that quickly was something that luckily I have had a lot of practice in and I enjoy doing. But I had to be persuasive in my message. I had to elicit emotion from the audience so that I could ask for these donations and hopefully relate to them the importance of what we were doing. And it is almost an uphill battle when you are working for Child Protective Services, those sort of entities, because you tend to already have a negative public perception. It's just already something that exists. And so having to ensure that I use my rhetoric, use my story to kind of change the narrative, that negative perception into something positive, into something that people want to be a part of. These are things that I took from previous speech classes, these techniques that I learned. And so these techniques would not have been possible if I hadn't been taught them, if, they weren't created during the classical period. Like Aristotle said, rhetoric could be used to create community, and I fully believe that. That's, what drove me to talk to stakeholders and partner with families. And I feel that if you have enough practice and you are able to understand the basics of rhetoric, that you can meet whatever goal you set forward. And this is still used today. Modern public speaking, we continue to uphold the criteria that was developed during the classical period. We see this in political debates. We see people who are really good at political debates and those who are not so good, and the outcomes of that. And we see it in social media now, that influencers are able to persuade their viewers to purchase this product or try this new trend. And that just comes with practice. And it still follows those guidelines that were set forth in the classical period. We still have to set up the way the communication is presented and what our goals are and how we're going to reach those goals.